You've got options. Hi, I'm Creative Katie Karen Burchill, and today I am going to make 3 mixed media projects, all starting with the same napkin. So here's the napkin in the middle and the 3 projects, but I'm also going to give you even more ideas for alternate projects that you can do. So many options. This beautiful napkin is called Blush Peony. It comes from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. There's a link in the description box. Go and check it out. Beautiful napkins, including this one. This napkin is so incredibly versatile. There are so many elements. So I'm just taking out some of my templates. This is for a coaster or an ornament template, a round template. I could go here, I could go there. A 5x7 will capture and give me a different look. And a square 4x4 will also give me a look. Now, I'm going to make 3 projects, like I said, but I'm going to give you alternates as well. So this video is well worth your time. So I'm going to make a Christmas ornament using one of these wood rounds. I'm going to make a 4x4 square fridge magnet and a 5x7 canvas. And I'm going to prepare all 3 of these substrates by giving them a coat of gesso. Now, I'm doing the round Christmas tree ornament, but I could use that round and make a coaster. I could use a square coaster as well. And instead of a 5x7 canvas board, I could do a card front. And then, of course, we could do an art journal page. But they all start the same way. The same steps apply. And step 1, remove those excess plies from the napkin. There usually are 2. Peel it off so that you can only use the first layer. Now, this is what I call harvesting the napkin elements. I am taking a liner brush with a little bit of water and I'm water cutting out the elements. This is going to allow me to place it on whatever substrate I want to use. The templates have given me an idea of what I can use it for, what would fit. And now I'm just cutting out the elements and to further decide exactly what I'm going to use. So I'm just rough cutting this right now. I'm not being overly precise. I will be coming in and cutting closer. I want to water cut instead of using scissors because that gives me a deckled edge and that disappears when I glue it down. A lot more than that, just a straight cut edge. But if cutting is what you do, leave the plies on, cut, and then take the excess plies. So there I now have fitted them on the substrates that I have chosen to do. And now I want to just remove any excess white. I'm not necessarily going right next to the focal image here, but I am cutting off the excess. That's just my preferred way of doing it. Because the background is white of the napkin, it will fade. But if it was a colored napkin or somewhat has some shade to it, that you really do want to take more of the napkin off. So this is going to be an ornament. And actually, all 3 of these items, I've chosen to use this peony napkin because these are gifts for my sister-in-law, whose mother recently passed away. Her favorite flower was a peony. So I'm making some mementos and things in memoriam for her. So after the gesso is dry and my napkins, the elements have been harvested and I know which ones I'm going to use, I want to apply a layer of color, but I don't want a lot of color. I don't need a lot of something going on in the background here. So I am not going to be doing a lot in the background. So here I am putting a coat of unbleached titanium with white gesso, a light neutral background, kind of got that vintagey peonies. It seemed to go together. For some reason, I wanted lace and vintage and peonies. Just in my mind, that was all associated together. I wanted to add a little bit of interest, but nothing too in your face. So I put a little bit of brown with the unbleached titanium, and I'm just stamping a little bit of script. I don't want to overtake the focal image, but I have a hard time just leaving it as a flat background. So I'm just stamping this in there very, very lightly. And then I'm positioning back the napkins. And it's the tone has changed. It's not as bright and light. Definitely has that vintage feel. So in order to glue this down, I'm using my fluid matte medium. I use the Liquitex brand. Love it. It is a matte finish and it works well for gluing things down and it doesn't leave any shiny bits. So I put some underneath and then I put some on top and I'm being gentle with the brush because I don't want to rip the napkin. It gets very fragile when it gets wet, understandably. So this napkin, this blush peony is so great because I cut out 4 elements. I'm using 3. So there is one more. And then there's the other half of the napkin. So I have another 5 projects that I can do with this. So if you're doing multiple makes, if you're doing things like this to sell at a craft fair, this kind of napkin is a surefire winner because you're going to be able to use so much of it. Now, this one, I am turning this into a Christmas ornament, but you could use the same substrate and turn this into a coaster. And I'll link videos to coasters and you can follow the steps of that. Basically, it's all the same here. The only difference is going to be at the end, you're going to use a varnish that is suitable for things that are going to be hot. When you put a hot coffee cup on this, you want to use a different varnish. So once this is dry, I'm using a file from the Dollar Tree to just cut off the excess. And quite honestly, people, I could just finish this right now. They looked amazing. But I wanted to add a little bit more, especially on the 5x7. I grabbed this link tiles stencil and I'm adding some stenciling with the color yellow oxide. And as soon as I put it down, it was like, oh yes, this works. It warmed up the substrate, the my project, and I absolutely loved what it did to the color of the peonies. Totally changed it. And at the end, you're going to see I've taken a picture of the part of the napkin that I used for each of the substrates. And you can see how different each of them are, how much I changed them. I'm liking that color so much, I'm just giving a little bit extra to all of them, even though I'm not stenciling on here. And the reason I'm not adding stenciling here is these are really small substrates. You don't need to add much. Don't get carried away. Sometimes I develop an 8-layer background, but this isn't that time. I'm edging with that yellow oxide. I'm just loving the warmth that it brings to these projects. So these are my Inktense blocks. They are ink. They act like watercolor, but they're permanent when they are done. I'm just doing a bit of a cleanup here. Always a good idea so you don't get smudges on your projects. I've grabbed some gesso and I'm going to use gesso and my Inktense blocks to colorize, to paint over these flowers, the peonies. I'm adding a little bit of gesso here and there. This is making it look like this is going to be like I actually painted the peonies, not like I glued down a napkin. Now, doing overpainting like this is a little scary when you start. But believe you me, it is easier than you think. And Oh, I challenge you, give it a try. I've added some gesso, and then I'm coming in with a color that I've matched. I've got my swatched colors. You're going to see them later. And I'm just adding color just to deepen that color, to brighten it a little bit. And I'm going to make this look very painterly. And you'll see the difference again at the end. Kind of give you the before and after. The eye is going to think this is a peony, so you don't have to be so precise. It's more of an abstract peony rather than a photo. So again, the process is typically just adding some gesso and really I'm just globbing it on and then colorizing it. Sometimes I wait for the gesso to dry, sometimes I don't, and you get that mixed kind of look. Here are my swatches, so I'm just matching it to the color, grabbing the Inktense block that works, and just a quick test on paper before I actually use it on my project. It's the right color. And then I just go over top of that gesso. And here the gesso isn't completely dry, and I'm just flooding it with color. Some people say, but Karen, the Inktense blocks are really expensive. And true, because you're buying so many at one time, the price is up. But if you divide it by 24 or 36, the price point isn't that high compared to other things. And these will never dry out. They will last forever. I've had these for 8 years. I absolutely love them in my art journal and my mixed media, especially because they are permanent once they've been activated and they're dry. So here I've sped up the video, but I'm going through each of the projects and doing the same thing, adding gesso, then colorizing it and mixing the colors. I'm not necessarily keeping the colors exactly as they were. I'm not too worried about it. I'm keeping pretty much, and then just dropping in the color. You can over color like this using watered down acrylic paints as well, if that's all what you have. And I've done that, and you can definitely see me doing that in other videos. I think I grabbed the burnt sienna color, just I realized that would be a good addition to this. Gesso and then color from the Inktense blocks. And then gesso, and I just keep going till I have, it looks good to me. So I add the gesso and then I'm basically putting the color back on, but now it has that texture from the gesso that's there. And that's what's going to make it look like I've painted, like it's been hand painted. So instead of the 5x7 canvas board, which this is, you could make a 5x7 card or a 6x4 card. It would fit and you'd be able to do exactly the same thing. That being said, a 7x10 art journal page would also work. I make a pool of green paint and I'm splattering with the green after I've painted, colorized some of those leaves on the various projects. Like I said, I'm keeping this super simple and doing the 3 projects together. This took just over an hour for me to complete all 3 projects because it's the same paint, it's the same technique that's basically being applied to all of them. I am very happy with how it's turning out. I decide to give this a splatter of gold as well as the splatter of green, and then I let that dry while I go and have lunch. Now I want to add a sentiment, and I want to print my sentiments on tissue paper. So I've printed out the sentiments. I've kind of played around with the size and got them the size that I wanted. And that's what you see the paper underneath. And now I have some pre-cut tissue papers that I've ironed so they're perfectly flat. And I'm taping them on exactly where it's going to print off. So this, by having the printed copy underneath, I know where the text is going to print and I know where exactly to put my tissue paper. I usually have a full sheet when I print onto tissue paper, and then something goes into my stash, but I know I'm going to use a couple of these. And I like to have an extra one because sometimes it crinkles as it goes through the printer, or something happens when you're gluing it down. And I've just learned that it's good to have an extra one. So here I'm taping it down, trying to prevent things from buckling or wrinkling. And here I kind of got a bit of a buckle here. So I'm pulling it up and trying to get rid of that so it doesn't wrinkle when it goes through the printer. Now, my printer is a laser printer, and you're going to have to decide whether you're going to risk putting tissue paper through. There's a little bit of risk with, some people don't want to do that because they might inadvertently, cause problems with their printer. So you have to decide. I put it in my printer face up. That's the way my printer works. And hit print, cross my fingers, and it is done. Now I'm just cutting it apart. I'm leaving the tissue paper on the backing. The backing gives it support, makes it easier to cut out. Little tip there. But I'm cutting it off. Now I've played around with the sentiment and figuring out where exactly I want the word. So now that I know, I'm going to replace the ones with the white backing with the tissue paper. I don't want to see that white on there because these are home decor items. I tend to go the extra step and print them off on tissue paper where the background goes completely clear and all you see are the words. But I'm going to save the printed part. That's going to go in my stash and I can use it on another project and another day. So here I have the paper backing on and I'm just bubble cutting around it, removing as much excess. Even though the tissue paper is going to predominantly disappear, I just want to get rid of as much of that extra as possible. And I find, again, straight edges tend to show up more than curved edges. So this says, moments become memories, memories become treasures. If I was doing this on a bigger art journal page, I would have added texture paste and had more texture because I have more real estate and therefore more space to do more techniques. Gluing it down, putting the vat medium underneath and then on top. I'm thinking that my word remember here is a little too big for my substrate, but I went with it. If I was doing it again, I would shrink that down. Because the words have black in them, I've decided to edge all of my substrates with black acrylic paint. I've got black paint on the Ranger blending foam, and I'm just edging it with black to frame it. It looks so quick when I've sped it up here. Now I need to do the other side of this Christmas ornament. But before I do that, I want to drill a hole for the hanger. And so I know which is the top because I want the top to be the same on both the front and the back of this Christmas ornament. Now I could just paint the other side a burgundy color instead of doing basically another side, but that's an individual choice. So here I've done it. I've prepared it the same way. I gave it a coat of gesso. I did the unbleached titanium and gesso. Now I'm adding a little bit of the yellow oxide, and I'm going to glue down one little part of the napkin and then add a sentiment. Once I have the positioning worked out, I'm going to use my fluid matte medium and glue down first the focal point and then the sentiment. I am working on a new sentiment pack called Memories. And the ones that you see me using here will be included in that pack. So if you're interested in that, let me know and I'll get busy. I decided to stencil in some stenciling on here because I had an open space. And just, again, gluing down the sentiment that's on tissue paper. Using the file to get rid of the excess. You want to make sure that that napkin is completely dry. It'll come off so much easier and you will have less hassle. And then I'm just overpainting, just like I did on the other one. So the same steps for every substrate. So it doesn't matter if you're doing an art journal page, an ornament, a coaster. What matters is setting up the composition to fit the size. And then again, like I did in the other one, after I paint the green leaves, I'm going to splatter with green paint and then gold. And there are the 3 projects. I love how they turned out. Which one is your favorite? There's the other side of the ornament. So this is a 5x7 canvas board. And this can be popped into a frame, a black frame, take off the glass, or it could be displayed with a plate holder, just like that. This is a fridge magnet, but you can buy wooden coasters, that wooden 4x4 ones, and you can turn it into a coaster. Here is the Christmas ornament. I love how this turned out, double-sided. Now I'll add a gold ribbon to this, or I could match it to the color that's in there. But I've decided to use some of this jute. This is kind of an olive green. It matches the green, and I'm just going to feed it through there, and then I'll tie it. But first, I need to give these 2 coats of polyacrylic varnish. This is in satin, and I'll let that dry. So here is peony, blush peony, this beautiful napkin. So many elements in here that you can use to create a multitude of things. So what will you create? An ornament, a magnet, a coaster, a canvas? Well, you don't have to decide. You can do it all. Stay tuned and look at all the close-ups. I am going to be showing close-ups of each of the projects next to the napkin. And you can see here the difference between what was on the napkin and how I altered it with my overpainting technique. If you haven't overpainted, give it a try. It's easier than you think. Until next time, go get creative.